Now that we know how to solve one-step equations by balancing, we're going to take it a little step further and look at how to solve two-step equations by balancing. So what's slightly different about this example is that all the ones we've looked at before have only been something like x plus 8, and we've only had a single x on the left-hand side. And what's different here is that we have a multiple of x on the left-hand side, so we have 3x instead of just x. So the second step that we're going to do here involves undoing that 3x. So we'll just start quickly with looking at what we would have done if it was just a one-step equation, and that would have been to subtract 8 from both sides. And if we were to subtract 8 from both sides, we would end up with 3x on the left-hand side, just on its own, and 27 on the right-hand side, because the 8 and the subtracting 8 cancel each other out, and then 35 subtract 8 gives you 27. And we've looked at equations like this before, way back at the start of the equations topic, and we should know how to solve this. So 3x means 3 times x, and we don't have to put that times sign in. So 3x, or 3 times x, equals 27. If you want to undo x being timesed by 3, you do the opposite of timesing by 3. And the opposite of timesing by 3 is dividing by 3. And when you do that, you end up with x equals 9. And we spoke in the previous video about how you could check your answer, and you can do that again here. You can substitute back in your x equals 9 into the original equation to make sure that it balances and that it's the same. So 3x, if x is 9, is 3 times 9, which is 27, and 27 plus 8 is 35. So we've done it right. The second example is quite similar. So we have 2x plus 3 equals 13. We're going to try and solve this equation to get x. So we're always thinking about, I want to get x on its own, and what is stopping x from being on its own. So important is that you always do the adding or subtracting before you do the dividing. Okay, you can't divide by 2 here because the 3 isn't being multiplied by 2, it's only the x that is. So you have to get 2x on its own first, and then x on its own. So we're going to take 3 away from both sides, which will give us 2x on its own. So 2x equals 10. And then if we know that 2x, or 2 times x, is equal to 10, to find 1x, we just divide both sides by 2. And that leaves you with x, just 1x, but remember we don't have to put a 1 in here. We can just write x equals, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. If you wanted to check that, you would say 2 times 5, which represents your 2x, plus 3 equals 13. So before we talk through example 3, can you just have a little look and see if you can notice what's different about this one compared to the previous two examples that we've looked at. So our previous example was 2x plus 3 equals 13. And before that, we had 3x plus 8 equals 35. So the difference here is that with this equation, we have a takeaway sign in the middle. We have 5a minus 7 equals 23. And we're going to solve this equation to find the value of a. So it doesn't matter what letter it is. It could be x, it could be any letter, and we're going to solve it in the same way. So if we want to undo the takeaway 7, if I want to get rid of takeaway 7, I have to add 7 to both sides. So we're thinking about doing the opposite. That leaves us with 5a on the left-hand side is equal to 30 on the right-hand side. That comes from doing 23 plus 7. Important that you don't do 23 minus 7. And if we know that 5a, or 5 times a, is equal to 30, to get 1a, or a equals on its own, divide both sides by 5, and you're left with a equals 6. And you can check that if you want to make sure that it works. So the only difference is that instead of taking away a number from both sides, we're adding a number to both sides to undo this -7 that's here and to make sure that everything's staying balanced. And for the fourth and final example, it's another question where we have a takeaway sign in the middle. So we're going to add 3 onto both sides. If you add 3 to the left-hand side, we need to add 3 to the right-hand side. Remember, always thinking about balancing. So we still have 4y on the left equals 24 on the right. And if we know that 4 times y, or 4 lots of y, is equal to 24, to find what 1y is, or y on its own, you just divide both sides by 4. And that leaves you with y equals 6. So now you know how to solve both 1- and 2-step equations. The first step for 2-step equations is to either add or subtract. That depends on what the left-hand side of your equation looks like. If it's an add that's on the left-hand side, you subtract, and if it's a subtract on the left-hand side, you add, so you're doing the opposite. The second step is to divide both sides, remember, by whatever number is attached to your x. And that is how you solve 2-step equations.